Total War multiplayer started out 20 years ago with the first game as a way for its players to immediately engage its new style of real-time tactics in head-to-head, in PvP. 11 years later, and it had finally ascended with Shogun 2 into a rich and efforted standalone game mode, replete with features and depth and endless replayability and possibility. Now, in the year 2020, Total War multiplayer has shriveled into a zero-budget, bare-bones 90s LAN era head-to-head at best, or entirely non-existent at worst, and as is now typical and to be entirely expected with the launch of the new games. The stagnation and regression tendency of modern Total War therefore can arguably never be seen more clearly and grievously than with the multiplayer aspect, which is now flirting with its own extinction. This is the complete opposite of where Total War multiplayer was 8 years ago, where it had seen years of interest slowly build on YouTube from Rome Total War, and this interest was now being encouraged and justified by the developers themselves with investment into Shogun 2's ambitious and highly experimental Avatar Conquest mode. With the ambitious effort of Avatar Conquest, Shogun 2 now had its own surging multiplayer scene on YouTube, with a second generation of YouTubers now rapidly following the first, and with the only way to go being up, and with me excitedly anticipating it from a front row seat with my own growing Total War audience, and fully intent on being right in the middle of it as it hopefully explodes. Every Total War game to precede Shogun 2 was incomplete, and every Total War since has been hollow. Shogun 2 set the bar and was the crowning of the entire franchise. Everything since has fallen short, sometimes falling short of what existed in Shogun 1 20 years ago, because Shogun 1 launched with a functional multiplayer already in place on launch, at a time when most people didn't even have internet. Now, in 2020, you reliably buy your Total War games over the very internet that the games themselves can no longer be bothered to make use of. What you typically have instead are poorly executed and entirely separate attempts to cash in, like the Total War Arena that fell flat in 2018 and was then sold to China to cut their losses 2 years later in 2020. Also in 2020, you have yet another card game that really should have nothing to do with Total War whatsoever, especially when this minigame arguably already existed more meaningfully in Shogun 2's Avatar Conquest as a way to add yet another rich dimension to its multiplayer battles, which were in themselves another rich dimension to a complete game. And while I'm writing this, I just noticed we have yet another Total War Battles mobile game announced. Also, before I go on, I'm going to draw attention once again to the serious foul play that goes on over at the Total War subreddit. Less than 12 hours after my last full form video went up, the video in which I referenced the executively decided character assassination I've had to deal with on Reddit since I started uploading critique videos, a thread appears on the Total War subreddit slandering me for free Reddit karma, as I just described at the end of the video. This happened within hours of my first video in 3 weeks. It wasn't a coincidence, as many people noticed. For the post, they picked a 2-month-old example of how I initially responded to the sustained harassment that I've started having to deal with since I began uploading these critiques, because those poisoned interactions are the only specks of dirt that even exist on me, and they posted it on the sub to take their chances. Because the subreddit has been weaponized against me repeatedly by its mods in accordance with company policy, this venture actually succeeded as I accurately predicted it would 12 hours earlier, and it gathered over 6,000 upvotes before it ran out of steam. It's a cycle, and the mods permit it to happen every single time, and they even encourage it. This can be clearly determined from how they were observed to be meddling in the thread during its ascent to the top of the subreddit. The mods were steering the thread like a runaway train. The misconduct doesn't end there. It's also notable to me that the exact same thread was posted months ago during the last round of executively decided smearing and was promptly deleted for breaking rules, caught early at 30 upvotes. This thread is identical to that one, but rather than being immediately deleted again, and as would be consistent, it's allowed to stay up and it tops the sub. It was also interesting to me that while the thread was boiling away on its ascent to 6,300 karma, one of its 600 comments completely mixed me up with some other YouTuber that I have absolutely nothing to do with, for something that's frankly completely innocuous, and that they apparently said over a decade ago, and that then became the most upvoted comment on the entire thread, and then the comments in response to it just ran with it, contorting and twisting it further and further. That ludicrous smearing was left untouched and is the top thread on the whole post now. So I'm at the top of the Total War subreddit with a 2-month-old interaction, and it was an interaction with someone that was engaged in sustained harassment towards me, and thanks to this subreddit and its mods and users, now the top comment chain on the thread is slandering me by mixing me up with someone else for something they did a decade ago. This exact same bullshit slandering happened 2 months ago. Another repeating pattern. At the same time as that, another section of the comments became its own little lynching mob, trying with insidious futility to have my channel terminated by YouTube. After that, I got an email from Twitter informing me that my tweets are being reported and that I hadn't done anything wrong. Bullshit reports. I also got reports on my own subreddit, on my own posts. Guess who gets to review the reports on posts made on my subreddit? How many spurious reports were made on my YouTube channel? Only Google knows. The comment calling for them had at least 100 upvotes and plenty of replies anyway. It was sinister enough for random spectators to try to give me heads up DMs to warn me about it all. All of this grotesque shit I've described was permitted to unfold completely uncurtailed by the mods of the subreddit because they were steering it every step of the way as it existed at the top of their subreddit for over 24 hours, violating their own rules time and time again, but being completely in line with their now obvious agenda, which is clearly the only thing dictating any of their actions at this point. While they were permitting all of this grotesque shit to occur untouched, they were scanning the thread and meddling, presumably deleting comments exposing how the thread was transparent bullshit whenever astute observers were making them. The mods of the Total War subreddit have therefore been documented being extremely manipulative, breaking their own subreddit's rules and completely undermining their integrity as moderators, now clearly driven by an agenda other than moderation of their forum. All of this happened in full public view and is documented extensively and with additional details in my stickied Reddit post, which I'll link in the description for further examination if you're curious. You're free to speculate about why they're doing this, to what extent they do this of their own accord, and why it is that they're permitted to behave as flagrantly unethically and, frankly, desperately as this. Regardless of all else, it's just sad to see that the subreddit dedicated to the Total War series and which has official CA presence can be so easily stripped of all consistency and honesty, and that it has been so clearly and effortlessly observed with absolutely no direct involvement from me because I'm banned from there and is now documented forever. If the mods of r/Total War had any integrity whatsoever or abided by their own rules and statements, none of this could have been able to happen. Now, they've created a powder keg that they're under-equipped to handle and navigate. 14-year-old kids throw tantrums and farm karma with drama, and they encourage it and enable it, and it backfires like this and is fully documented. I wonder if the Total War subreddit mods are being paid to debase themselves, and hopefully the ones in possession of a spine are at least free to leave whenever they please, because I'd absolutely hate to be a mod on the Total War subreddit and to be at all complicit in this kind of misconduct while representing these games, which frankly deserve way better. The dust has settled, and I'm still here. The thread was eventually deleted after it completely ran out of steam and lingered at 6,300 upvotes for over 12 hours. In addition to deleting the thread, they also deleted the top post of the chain trying to get my YouTube channel deleted. Why did they delete that comment along with the post when they finally intervened, neutrally and finally? Was it because one of the people that harassed me in the first place to start all of this turned up out of nowhere and blurted out a full confession that showed I'd been acting perfectly reasonably all along and that the thread was nothing but a bullshit smear job? Was it because they noticed I was now in the habit of exhaustively documenting every single thing they were doing and not doing on a stickied post on my own subreddit, and that they realised they were being held accountable, with a record of their abysmal actions now standing in full public view for all time? Was it because they noticed the thread had completely run out of steam and the brigading and harassing and smearing was to have been to no effect other than to harden my resolve, so now it's time to whitewash and cover up and just pretend nothing happened? I'll let you speculate. In the meantime, I'd like a public statement from CA regarding whether they specifically instructed their moderators to behave like this, and if they intend to take action to prevent misconduct like this from ever happening again, on this subreddit that represents them and their games, on the subreddit where they have official presence and regularly break news about their franchise. I'd once again like an explanation from CA regarding yet another massive discrepancy. And most of all, far from what this is supposed to do, to discredit me in an attempt to take the force out of my critiques, this should be perceived as a clear vindication of my critiques and as a transparently manipulative attempt to stifle them, the latest and most desperate so far. And here's another interesting way to look at it now that there's a pattern establishing and it looks like I should be getting used to this. That smear job thread capped off at about 6,300 upvotes before it was deleted by a mod. And just recently, the thread announcing the latest DLC, the latest moneymaker for their flagship product, only got 4,500 upvotes in 48 hours. So a thread with no purpose other than to discredit me, a bullshit thread that I can refute in seconds with copy-pastes that I put together months ago, a bullshit thread about how I decide to directly handle sustained harassment and which luckily produced a blurted confession from one of the fucking idiots that were harassing me in the first place months ago, exonerating me in a way I never should have hoped to be able to do myself, but managed to do anyway. A thread producing phony outrage that some people even apologised to me for initially joining in with after they went over to my countering post on my subreddit and saw how they were clearly being misled and manipulated with bullshit smearing, is better at gaining traction on their subreddit, their main social outreach, a place they pay staff to patrol, than threads announcing their actual products. It's just like 2 months ago where the last bullshit slander thread used my slap on the wrist response to being cyberstalked and harassed by a mentally ill person to gain 10,000 upvotes, one of the highest of all time on the sub, coming in only barely behind what was supposedly the day of reckoning of an apparent ethno-state advocating crypto-fascist, which is about as bad as it gets. According to this sub, someone responding decisively to being stalked and harassed is only about 10% less outrageous than apparent ethno-state advocacy in their midst. I'm only marginally behind Hitler according to this sub and its priorities. Similarly, according to this sub and its mods and users, someone responding to harassment that's sustained through and around bans and blocks, responding to it with a light wrist slap over Twitter, is more attention-worthy than the latest DLC they're all presumably there for, and which is the point of all of this. Not only is what I did worth more outrage upvotes, it warrants mob mentality harassment including spurious flagging campaigns and outright smearing and slandering. Shithole sub of shithole redditors with shithole mods directed by shithole community staff under a shithole developer. Alright, back to the subject. I'd rather not have to take these tangents, but if they're playing dirty like this, I'll always be obligated to notice it, to document it, and to put the spotlight on it. Let's start at the beginning. Total War has always been primarily a single player game. the player against the world, with the rest of the world being controlled by the AI. But what happens when this unique style of real-time tactics game is permitted to support player versus player, where the notorious Total War AI is removed from the equation, and the methodical tactical gameplay monopolised by this franchise can occur simultaneously and interactively on both sides, as thinking players assume control of these massive units, with both sides powered by human intelligence, guided by long-term planning, and unfolding alongside real anticipation.
Fuck, I forgot. It's rough.
This is a game of chess, and you're losing it, buddy.
Yeah, I've noticed. It's okay though.
My pawns are further forward, and you've just...
I don't know. I think it can still go either way. But you definitely do have a positional advantage. For now.
And best of all, deception. Multiplayer in Total War has existed since the inception of the franchise with Shogun 1 in 2000. It was a game design experiment arriving at the start of the new millennium and was mechanically very clunky as a result. Real micro was almost impossible due to the simple and limited interface, which was compounded further by the game mechanics themselves. If even the edge of your cavalry unit got clipped by Yari Samurai, the unit easily became stuck and was resigned to taking heavy losses. It was the complete opposite of Three Kingdoms, where cavalry can charge and withdraw through complete clusterfucks with light casualties, and of Troy, where infantry can run through hostile units without being punished for it. With Shogun 1, micro was not rewarded if it was even possible. It was the complete opposite of Troy, where units do their damage on the charge with no penalty for the pullout, with heavy incentive for the charge cycling, and with an optimal charge cycle loop frequency that's very fast, about every 10 seconds, with 20 units all requiring that exact same level of attention, with the game rewarding, and arguably even requiring, a 200 APM to be competitive at any hypothetical high level of competition. Shogun 1 was slow, it was about positioning, it was about being able to see further ahead than your opponent, it was about possessing awareness of the minute advantages that exist within the game, and will be available 5 minutes from now. It was a game that drew directly from Sun Tzu, and tried to reward what he determined to be wise: terrain, fatigue, morale. It was more like a chess game than it was resembling of a StarCraft clickfest. Archers at the top of hills to extend their range and project their fire out to extreme distances. They still can't shoot at us. The height advantage that we have on them is too great. They can't retaliate. They need to get closer to retaliate, and that involves slogging up a muddy hill in the rain to get closer. So this is a massive advantage being on this hill. This is a hell of a power position. Infantry kept fresh and close to the cavalry that can deter the archers that would threaten them. Cavalry hidden to spring ambushes with precise timing. Small clans formed around this new and original game, and competition immediately began. The multiplayer was simple, but there existed a basic ranking system with a jostling of players to accumulate points on a scale from 50 to 150, where you climbed by beating higher ranked players, like an elo system. And so, a small multiplayer community developed around these solid fundamentals and this simple but robust ladder. It was before the age of YouTube, but small clans coalesced and competed intensely. There was even an initial interaction between the devs and the players, where players were invited to create their own maps and which would then be included in future patches and expansions, with credit given by the developers. There was clearly a hopefulness and an optimism towards the multiplayer of Total War from the developers. They assigned importance from day one. There was excitement and there was possibility. That was the first Total War multiplayer scene, and little remains but testimonies from the people that were there, or second-hand accounts from people like me. Maybe some of them will find this video and elaborate even further than I can in the comments. That would be cool. The next landmark of Total War multiplayer was with Rome Total War, This was a fully 3D Total War that emerged on the eve of the birth of YouTube. This was the beginning of accessible, popular Total War. This was the Total War that broke into the mainstream with Time Commanders on the BBC. YouTube channels soon popped up and started casting multiplayer matches, breaking down their battles and giving people a way to watch others play Total War. This was Time Commanders of the internet and of YouTube. Anyone can be Alexander the Great now, and some people actually were. There was now a clear mechanism of discovery, of building knowledge and of learning. There was now a first generation of YouTubers that can inspire and spawn a possible second, especially if the right game came along to capitalise in time. I started uploading Total War to YouTube because I returned to Total War after my Empire-induced hiatus and immediately noticed that Total War had done 3 big things right all at the same time with Shogun 2. First of all, it was a modern game with a modern interface. The mouse action was clean and the camera was smooth. This was a massive step up from the Medieval 2 that had constituted my last heavy playing of Total War. I was finally getting to play with clean, responsive, satisfying controls. Secondly, Shogun 2 was followed up immediately with an excellent expansion in Fall of the Samurai, which finally did a good job of the line infantry and artillery that Empire had just made a mess of, and that I was still sad about. I was finally able to appreciate it, and to feel caught up. Amends had been made. Another reason for me to be optimistic about Rome 2, things were back on track. I even had Jeff Van Dyke playing in the background during it. There's something just so satisfying about that tinny concussive sound of artillery shells smacking the ground.
Anybody? Oh, there's nobody else with guns. There's Royal Marines too. I'm gonna bring down my general, but this is tough.
I'm hitting the Shogatai. Now's the time to flank and blob them together, and I can get a hit on them when they're compacted. Get these turn these levies to face the Shogatai. Levy against Shogatai is good. Turn them.
Alright, hit. They're so tired though. They're exhausted. Just keep hitting the Royal Marines.
Yeah, I'm getting direct hits. So, Shogun 2 was followed up immediately with Fall of the Samurai, a game that finally gave me the working line infantry combat in Total War that I was sad I had missed out on. It was a standalone expansion, and it unified 3 great and ambitious things: Shogun 2's battles, Fall of the Samurai's battles, and Avatar Conquest mode. And that's the third piece. Shogun 2 had a substantial and competitive multiplayer in Avatar Conquest. A true arena worthy of real Total War competition. There are a lot of us that still fondly remember exploring the Avatar Conquest mode for the first time. Unlocking the specific units you wanted was like finding a new tool in a Swiss Army knife, and then naming them and carefully considering your upgrades for them, all the way down to exact 50 Koku increments for slight performance tweaks. You are now min-maxing in multiplayer in Total War, just like you'd been min-maxing in single player in Total War for over a decade. And now it matters even more than ever, because it's in PvP with someone else going to the same efforts and lengths to find the same competitive edge. You'd hit the ceiling when you finally got that elusive retainer from the post-battle drops, a system based on complete randomness and that tried to incentivise variety of playstyle by random distribution, but often just frustrated players with having to wait to play how they want. Becoming attached to our units as they emerge as battle-winning MVPs for us. I can still remember back to specific moments in individual battles where they were instrumental in gritty, hard-fought victories. You really did feel like a daimyo assembling a formidable army and shaping it to your own exact specification. You'd come up against bow armies, sword armies, naginata armies, cavalry armies, hero armies, and even hero armies. It was always funny when a guy brought the Tetsubo heroes. Every battle was different, and they were all meaningful because they were a meeting of two thinking minds that had put, hopefully, a lot of thought into every aspect of their army. Wins were hard earned, and every single ranked match victory was valuable, both for your ranking and also for buying the upgrades that you wanted for your veterans. Every decision in those battles mattered, and had rippling consequences, and these decisions and actions could be endlessly analysed because of how deep the gameplay had the potential to become. This was why so many YouTube channels suddenly popped up all at the same time and started exploring the meta and talking about battles and balance issues and player experience. Everything required for a competitive scene was in place, and there was even some rumouring of Total War becoming an esport. All that was needed was continued support and investment from the developers. This was the beginning of something new, so the players patiently waited as the developers came to grips with it. It was 3 months into Fall of the Samurai, and the patches had been consistent and effective, and now Rome 2 is announced. Rome 2 launches, and it's emaciated.
Interesting strategic depths of the game. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the campaign, we're absolutely supporting multiplayer campaign, 1v1, 1+1 co-op as well, so you can play with a friend against the AI. Fundamentally, we want to create. You've got these gameplay experiences that in single player Rome, right? And we want to support those in multiplayer. So in terms of the battles, we've got ranked battles, unranked battles. We want to have leaderboards. You've got 1v1 battles.
There's almost nothing there. It was a bare minimum head-to-head with a broken ladder system, and the only work that was even done on it afterwards was some tedious snail-paced patching to eventually bring it up to basic functionality, to something actually playable. The only fun I got out of it was novelty value and trolling. It was gradually patched in an effort to balance the gameplay and give it something remotely resembling of competition, but it's now years later, and I still see comments from people complaining about how the patching went on my recent videos, with comments even sometimes saying that the patches eventually started to make things worse. So after the glory of Shogun 2, they made the decision to go with an emaciated bare-bones multiplayer with absolutely no investment, and they still managed to fuck it up. They abandoned their most serious and competitive and dedicated players that had spent months or years building YouTube channels for this, that had spent thousands of dollars on PCs in anticipation of Rome 2 and its multiplayer scene, and they get this shit shoveled at them instead. They all left and took their competitive grit and expertise and pioneering attitude with them.
Not interested. But really, guys, it just from names you can tell what it is. It's just something that creative assembly designers see as cool stuff. And that's probably my whole grip with the game. I see the game completely different from creative assembly, it seems. What they see cool is Scorpion Pod Ballista, something like that. Like, for me, I don't care at all. What I want is game where we can compete, where we can actually feel ourselves generals, not a game where I can throw venom at enemies. It's such a minor thing, honestly.
And now the developers have lost something that they can probably never get back. A community of veterans there from the start, and that had worked together to push their games, and that could reliably show them how their game is currently balanced and how it plays and where it needs to go.
Yeah, go on.
Do you remember what the last thing we actually did on this game was before we just gave up on it? We just agreed, like, we're done with this. Do you remember what it was?
Wasn't it War Dogs versus something like that?
Nah, it was we were sitting on the multiplayer waiting screen, and it was taking 20 minutes to get a match against people, 2v2. And you were thinking of making a video. I remember clearly how you were saying, I'm going to upload a video showing how ridiculous this is. And you were sitting there saying that it should not take 20 minutes to get a match with someone. You can't actually play it. That is actually when we gave up. That was when we realised there's nothing there for us, because we were sick of the campaign. We realised the campaign wasn't fun. and we just wanted to get some more 2v2s because that was actually fun. Although it wasn't fun because the game was good, it was fun because it was kind of silly, like using 20 units of Spartan hoplites and shit. Attila was a clone of Rome 2, and by that point, the multiplayer community was mostly dead. So Attila just reiterated the decision to not invest into multiplayer whatsoever, and doubled down on their abandonment of their players, vindicating those that had immediately bailed out, if it achieved anything at all. I had abandoned Total War by the time Attila launched, but I returned to Total War with 3K and heard about what an absolute mess the multiplayer was in 3K, and the idea of single entities and magic buttons and passive buffs in multiplayer has no appeal to me whatsoever, so I didn't even try it. Until now. After hosting the lobby myself, because there are literally 0 multiplayer lobbies going in Three Kingdoms, fucking no lobbies whatsoever. For my first ever match in 3K, I built an army based on what I've always claimed works best in single player, because I honestly can't think of any way for a human player to counter a melee cavalry rush using a balanced army. And the guy I was playing all F4'd inside 2 minutes. My only Three Kingdoms multiplayer experience ever, and it started just as my single player campaigning ended. Spamming melee cavalry and doing a cavalry merry-go-round for which there exists no readily conceivable viable counter. I'm sitting here days later and I still don't know how I would use a balanced army to counter a full stack of melee cavalry in Three Kingdoms. I don't think it can be done. I think this game's multiplayer is completely fucked, and that there's been no serious investment by the developers whatsoever, and therefore no real passionate playing by the player base has occurred, and therefore absolutely no informed tweaking or tuning for gameplay whatsoever has ever been possible nor occurred. There's absolutely no way that I could get away with spamming 20 units of katana cavalry against a balanced player control army in Shogun 2. I'd get the floor wiped with me against any semi-competent player if I tried to pull that shit. And now there's Troy, the latest release, which I haven't even been able to play online yet, 3 months after launch. In Shogun 1, how the battlefield will look 30 seconds from now is heavily determined by how it looks right this second, and by what you did 30 seconds ago. In a game like Three Kingdoms or Troy, you can reshape the entire battlefield with just a few clicks, and everything completely changes in seconds. There's no commitment to actions, and I've still taken no losses. But this is looking precarious now. But I really want to chase these guys down. I'm being really cheeky here. But suddenly, my unit just spread it out. What the fuck? They just ran. Oh man. I hate when they're not cohesive like that. God damn it. But it seems like they're all making it out. And I'm putting them right into the charge here. Oh man, yeah, this is really... Oh, and then they broke off. So this is looking really good. Oh man. But... Oh, I think I just did some friendly fire there. And yeah, how many have we lost? None. Still lost none. Holy shit. So Troy is really forgiving. Units can slip through each other and slip away. Definitely is forgiving in that sense. There's no way for there to be real tactics. It's just a 3D timing puzzle between units and single player, and I think the multiplayer will be the same. The gameplay is attention based and possibility is entirely determined by APM. I don't think Troy's multiplayer is going to have any investment from the developers, and I don't think anything worthwhile will happen when the multiplayer launches. I expect it won't be long before it has 0 concurrent lobbies going, just like Three Kingdoms already has. And I'm not touching Warhammer. Fuck that. I'll just point out that there's usually only about 20 lobbies going at a time for a game with 20,000 concurrent players, and it has the exact same bare-bones 1990s LAN era features that Shogun 1 had, and that all Total War games after Shogun 2 downgraded back to, so nobody else gives a fuck about it either. What little multiplayer activity Warhammer has is entirely a result of the size of the game surrounding it, and has nothing to do with its actual merit. because it doesn't look like there exists any. And how could there be? It has a budget of 0. What kind of a backwards universe would we have to live in where quality and success happens without effort nor thought, without investment? Only one Total War game has ever had a proper multiplayer. Every other Total War game has gone with a 90s LAN era bare bones 1v1 match system. Maybe with a free-for-all, if you're lucky. This is the inevitable and fully intended consequence of real ambition being abandoned and a budget of 0 being assigned to all multiplayers after Shogun 2. I'd be remiss to not address co-op. Shogun 2 was also the first Total War game that had a functioning co-op mode. Empire Total War attempted a co-op campaign that it introduced as a beta patch. Sound familiar? But it was plagued with issues and never really succeeded. Just like the rest of the game, Shogun 2 finally made the elusive multiplayer campaign possible. I remember talking about the possibility of co-op campaigns when I was a kid, and I wasn't the only one. It's no coincidence that the first Total War campaign gameplay I uploaded to YouTube was a co-op campaign, and it was the first time 2 players did a co-op campaign with fully cranked up difficulty and pulled it off. We nailed it. I think it's the first successful co-op Total War campaign on YouTube, but I could be wrong. Regardless, 8 years ago, I was starting out my Total War YouTubing with max difficulty full form co-op campaigning and breezing it and uploading the entire thing. I think we should try doing head to head. Because that's the mindset we should have anyway for this Let's Play or whatever.
Come at me.
Come at me.
It's ready up.
Alright, so we're ready. I'm the Shimizu, you're the Date, and we fight for Kyoto. And now, you have to wait 3 months for games to allow co-ops to even happen at all, via beta patch. If you ever wonder why I'm disappointed, why there's a disconnect between me and modern Total War, that sums it up quite well. Shogun 2 had it from day one, and I was immediately pushing it as hard as possible. Troy gets it as a beta after 3 months. At this point, Total War games should be launching on day 1 with the 4 or 8 player co-op that's always being requested. So, another instance of stagnation and regression. No ambition seen here in 9 years now. And that's Total War co-op campaigns. Stagnation and regression. Something that's really disturbing to me is that they apparently tried to shut down the only real multiplayer experience they've ever had on offer. Shogun 2 players started to have serious problems with playing against other players in 2018, reporting error messages when trying to play matches. It seemed like CA were letting Shogun 2's multiplayer support drop, or trying to. Fortunately, there was an uproar from the community, with a change.org petition started and gathering nearly 600 signatures, and after 2 months, when people were ready to give up, CA fixed the issue and Shogun 2 was once again playable online. Brought back from the brink and still being enjoyed in 2020, 9 years after launch. I wonder what would have happened without that uproar, without that petition. Total War should be attempting to develop its immense multiplayer potential. They demonstrated an expectation of this potential with their investment into Shogun 2's avatar. They then tried to capitalise more directly on this potential with Total War Arena in 2018. The first real multiplayer effort since Shogun 2's Avatar, but also a complete departure from what made Avatar great, and a complete flop for reasons that can be gotten into later. Unfortunately, I don't think they understand what it is about Total War multiplayer that made it so good in the past. Total War multiplayer was so good in Shogun 2 because there was a progression you had control over. Most importantly of all, it had player freedom. You could choose. Also, it was alongside a single player campaign that stood strong on its own. If you got tired of stomping the AI in Shogun 2 single player, you could try your hand at the multiplayer with Avatar Conquest mode. If you got wrecked too many times on Avatar, you could always fall back to the base campaign and casually blitz Japan with Katana Samurai. They complemented one another while utilising many of the same elements and mechanics. Switching between them was like climbing a ladder of competence. Nothing remotely like that has recurred, and maybe never will. It's especially absurd that Three Kingdoms didn't reattempt Avatar Conquest, considering the easy setting it has with this giant Chinese landmass and all of these warring states with all of these characters. It's likewise absurd that Warhammer, a game that's supposedly capitalising on all of these tabletoppers and figurine painters getting to see their favourite universe coming to life finally, doesn't have a multiplayer where you can name and customise and paint your units like Shogun 2 had 9 years ago. We have a mobile game Total War announced instead. So we have main Total War titles that have completely stripped, bare bones multiplayer modes, and then we have all of these little separate endeavours like Arena, Elysium, mobile games, or a Dynasty Warriors ripoff for Three Kingdoms that was forgotten about faster than I thought was even possible. It's almost like they're not willing to develop something unless they've already got the headline in mind, and all they need to do is rush it out and slap a price on it and make a trailer for it. It's like they're doing absolutely everything in their power to avoid doing the one thing that has ever actually worked. An actual, substantial, full scope Total War game with a developed and substantial multiplayer that's always alongside a single player that the player can fall back on for respite when they want a break from PvP. A multiplayer that makes the player feel invested and like they're building something, and that they are always becoming more intimately in control of. A multiplayer that's competitive and that motivates players to learn and to push themselves and their units and their tactics so they can emerge on top. A multiplayer with an enthusiastic and optimistic player base. A multiplayer that can make streamers and YouTubers feel like they're not just wasting their time on a half-assed bare-bones multiplayer that's transparently such a massive pain in the ass for the developers that they're not even including it in their games at launch anymore, and that will be utterly irrelevant in a few months. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Troy's multiplayer was supposed to come in November, and the month's nearly over, and we only just got a hastily assembled trailer announcing a beta, as if the situation wasn't depressing enough already. So they've had 3 months, and this is the best they can do, after all interest in the base game has dropped off and most players have moved on, with nobody even uploading or watching the latest DLC. Sound familiar?
After Three Kingdoms, I said, okay, well, I'm not going to keep playing Three Kingdoms, right? Because, and it took them a month. By the way, this is a little side note. It took them a month after release to get multiplayer working. By the time they fixed it, nobody was playing multiplayer. Nobody.
Maybe they're mentally preparing us for no multiplayer whatsoever in future games, and this is the slow creep, with the only multiplayer experiences on offer being sold separately as card and mobile games. Direct and immediate return on investment. Minimum investment with maximum return from microtransactions and DLCs. That's the trajectory we are on. I wonder if I'm right. How they handle this multiplayer beta in Troy will be a good indicator. It's going to be interesting to see if tactics and terrain and fatigue and planning plays any role whatsoever in its multiplayer, or if it's just going to be a StarCraft clickfest of charge cycling and running away, like the single player has been for me. Shogun 2's multiplayer was so good that it motivated me to start playing Total War more seriously, to take my gameplay to the next level. Its ambitious scope and the possibilities it afforded definitely factored into my decision to get more invested in YouTube. I think it's because most of the YouTubers that do single player stuff, they're not really gameplay heavy, whereas I am. Like, I play on the hardest difficulty and I try and make it as good as possible. Like, I try and... It's not even hard for me when I play on legendary difficulty in any Total War game.
No, it's not. It's a cakewalk.
And that's because I understand the basics of what makes someone a good multiplayer player, like how rock paper scissors works, how all the factors that affect how a conflict goes works, like fatigue, elevation differences, that kind of thing. I understand all the basics, so do you, when you play legendary as well. But a lot of people don't. and it's quite shocking.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
I actually planned on being a multiplayer heavy Rome 2 player before Rome 2 arrived, but then Rome 2 arrived and it was shit, so I couldn't be bothered anymore.
I did as well. I wanted to play it online a lot as well.
Yeah.
I wasn't as enthusiastic as you because I thought it might not go anywhere because Total War's kind of like a single player focused game.
Yeah.
But you know, I think I said if they've invested in the multiplayer, I will play the shit out of it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, definitely.
But and we're going kind of off topic, but let's just say they haven't.
The multiplayer is just complete shit in Rome 2.
Yeah, and
it's
the
almost a waste of
matchmaking
time.
doesn't work at all either. It's a disgrace.
Yeah.
It's a fucking disgrace, and that's why I don't play it.
And that's why we did preparation for the tournament. If we hadn't have been so out of the loop when the tournament arrived, we wouldn't have bothered to prepare because we would already have known what works more or less. But we prepared quite heavily, and I think that gave me the advantage that allowed me to get to the final.
Mm-hmm. It's very satisfying, like, to see the builds that you worked on work against, like, apparently a good tournament player. Mm-hmm. Not just work, but completely fucking destroy.
Yeah.
My god, that party in charge last battle. Oh my god, I was so happy. I was so pleased.
Current attempts at multiplayer are all so half-assed and uninspired that I couldn't possibly feel invested in any of them. It would just be undignifying at this point. In the meantime, there are actual game lobbies in Shogun 2, and it's not hard to get a game. Also, I've got a Discord where I can organise games with like-minded players, and I also sometimes upload the good parts to my second channel when I get involved. If you want to experience the wonder of 4v4s in Shogun 2, or join in with my Playing with Patrons sessions, feel free to join up. One of the positives about playing the Shogun 2 multiplayer in 2020 is that you have 8 players all with PCs capable of handling these battles in a way that has never been possible before, and certainly wasn't back in 2011. It's been worth returning to Total War over the past year, just for those, honestly. And I recommend Shogun 2 Avatar Conquest over any other Total War multiplayer experience 9 years after it first arrived. As usual, Shogun 2 stands supreme, and the wait for something that can even hold a candle to it continues. Total War's last success was 8 years ago. Thanks for watching.
Alright, your army's gonna break in 2 seconds. Watch this. Come on, Banzai.
Should have gone more to the
Oh my god.
better flank there.
He's shooting.
Oh shit, he actually... Oh my god.
Oh my god, no. Fuck.
Oh my god.
Connor's mocking the left.
That second wind went all the way through the line.
Oh my god, I can't believe... But I think I still got this. Just... Great Guard need to make it there.
Wow, you're gonna come behind him.
How the fuck are we losing the melee?
Get fucked, bitch!
No, this is not over. This is not over, man. This is not...
Holy fuck, look at that lag.
Get fucked!
Oh man.
Look at the flags! Look at the flags! Look at the flags!
Oh no. I'm not even like touching the keyboard at this point.
What a shame.
Yo.
Safe! Safe, did you just get 300 IQ? Did you just get 300 IQ, Safe?
I'm shocked. What?
Dude, I 100% won that. That makes no
Get fucked!
Holy shit.
sense. Dude, that...
I'm fucking
Safe
shocked,
is
bro.
pulling a Trump.
Well, I don't understand why
shocked.
you're looking at the wrong direction.
The last stream.
Dude, my gun
How
was
did
firing.
you
Your
lose?
spear,
You know
you're
what?
looking at the wrong
Fuck
direction.
Fuck it. It's not over. It's not over till it's over.
Am I the only one that sees that? His unit is looking the wrong direction.
Fuck you, Shingen, bitch. I think I figured out like a strat that I'm gonna like. I know why I lost this now. This won't happen. I won't make the same mistake twice.
to micro shit. That's what. Like when you had the Nodachi, you can have act in the water and get behind them and get the mass grab.
No. I did. That's
Oh, you
you
attack
don't-
from the side. You needed to attack from the back. If you just
Yeah, I don't
waited a
have
few
to
more
fight that
seconds
dog.
to get them better in line, you could have gotten it.
No, I gotta kill Shingen and then. The problem is that these Yaris are not even fucking Yari well. He's got the sword dojo. That could have been like the determining factor, the sword dojo.
Wow, what a wonderful way to wake up. I join the room, I hear Safe say, your army's gonna rout in 2 seconds, and then I watch him get cucked. Thoroughly.
Oh, what?
Are you gonna take that safe from Zoe?
Zoe was here the whole time. The fuck?
No, she just got
I
here.
showed up just in time to see that happen. Like, the first thing I heard was Safe saying, your
Zoe
army's gonna
just
rout in 2
switched
seconds.
me, man. She just threw some fucking spell
Safe,
on my fucking.
Safe, all of your wins were just trivialized by what I just did. Sorry.
I'm gonna save this replay and I'm gonna look at it in detail because I actually had such a good edge that battle.
I know what happened.
Oh
I
my
know what
God.
happened, Dave. You fucked yourself.
No,
You shot your own men in the back, and they all routed after they got war cried.
You're a fucking
No, that's what happened. They shot your men in the back.
That is the
No.
best win I've ever had on Shogun 2 multiplayer, pretty much. I can't remember anything better than that.
Oh my god.
Basically, he blobbed all of his Yaris into like a very thin line and then just bulldozed through my thinner lines.
What do you mean?
It's cuck boy.
Who else saw what I did? Who else saw the play that I made that actually got the win? Who else saw it?
And also like
Was it the war
rear
cry?
charge
Was it the war
with
cry?
with
No.
with the
He
great charge.
snack passed with a cavalry and hit them in the
That
back.
too. Well, that
Yeah.
too, but I saw
Yeah,
that.
That was it. That's why
No.
everything routed. Your whole army was just fucked at that point. Everything.
No,
Was
but I
it
was
also
chain
because of the second wind with the Great Guard?
Yeah,
Oh
it
my
got all the
God,
way
that
through.
was- That was a crazy game though. I'm not
Oh
gonna
my
lie.
god, that was fucking crazy.
It's not good enough though.
Everybody was like on the edge of their seat the entire fucking game.
I thought Vaughn was gonna lose legit. I thought he was done. You know, he was out, and then you just
Oh my
fucking
God,
lost.
I
Holy
tried
shit!
with Banzai. Did you have a unit of fucking warrior monks?
Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
You had a unit of
Yeah.
warrior monks. Uh-huh. If I had that, I would have won. Fuck. What a game. Holy shit.
If you like what I do and want to support it, I've got a Patreon page. Special thanks to Matteo Olivetti, Nerdington, The Rody451, Halcyon, William Balangari, Robert Sparks, and Dake.